Good morning, everybody. John Fiocla here for GAI Insights for the Gen AI News Briefing. Rating your daily news, essential, important, or optional, saving you time, and we hope providing you insight. We have Ankash, Adam, Paul, and myself today, and me today. And interesting stuff. We have everything from Eric Schmidt's musings in front of an AI group at Stanford through a pretty comprehensive look at the creation of a framework for understanding pre-model and post-model training. Ankash, will you take us through the first one, please?
Sure, thanks, John. So the first one that we have for today comes from Eric Schmidt. So he was taking a session, I think, in Stanford, and he mentioned pretty interesting things about Gen AI. And he said that the next 2 years will shock you and agentic systems will be everywhere.
All right, Paul, Eric Schmidt out there making the business case for why we have a great research firm.
Yeah, I know this video certainly caused a little controversy. I think Stanford Engineering now has taken it down. There's a handful of others out there. I thought it was interesting. He kind of got his hands slapped, but I think for the AI leader, it's optional. It's the world's going to change. We know the world's going to change. I didn't find anything particularly noteworthy for AI leaders in this one.
Well, I agree it's optional. For me, there were two kind of noteworthy things. One was, Schmidt, I think, basically said the quiet part out loud, which is Google has a history of really aggressively grabbing things and then litigating later. And he basically, I think, challenged the class to go do that, go steal it, and then defend it. And which I thought was interesting. I thought the other interesting thing, though, is that and Paul, you and I have been spending a lot of time in the Valley lately. Even the people who are at the bleeding edge of this, and we work with some of them, there's so much uncertainty. I mean, here's a guy who, he comes from, was it NetSuite originally before he comes over and becomes CEO of Google? I mean, the guy's lived at the front end of, tech development and investing, and, his bank account will certainly show you he's done a pretty good job. And, he's saying, boy, don't know, right? Large models, small models, what's going to happen, how quickly this is going to move.
Hey, either John or Paul, we have the question from Kevin Petrie.
What's going to,
asking why Stanford pulled down the video. You want to just share a little more about
Kevin,
the controversy there?
Yeah, my understanding, Kevin, and I haven't followed it that closely, is he I think challenged the students, and I'm paraphrasing here, and he challenged the students to go out and do a TikTok competitor using AI, and then even if they have to steal the videos, and they can defend it later in the courtroom, in terms of kind of the way that Google did with Street View, Uber did with regulation. Basically go out and do it and defend it later. And if you have a successful business, then then you can afford to defend it. So that was I didn't watch the actual video. That was the reporting I saw on it. So
yeah, that was one.
The issue.
I think the other one, John, was that he was saying that Google's behind, flat-footed on AI, and I think a lot of people took offense to that.
Yes.
Yeah. Ankash's comment there. Apparently, he also said Google is good for work-life balance only.
Yeah.
So yeah.
He said.
Let's just say it was a controversial. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, and you can work any 24 hours of the day you want. Okay. I hope that helps, Kevin. Next.
Okay, the next
optional.
one comes
We're landing on optional. Sorry.
Yeah, optional. Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sure, John. Yes. So the next one comes from Air Street Press, and they are also talking about agentic AI, and their post is titled "Open-endedness is all we will need."
All right, we have our avatar, Adam. Go at it, baby.
Yeah, thanks, Ankash. If you'll scroll down to the little diagram with the mouse and the alien, I'll start talking about this. So, I consider this optional. It's an interesting concept, and I'll explain a little bit about what they mean by open-endedness. But the point they're trying to make is that agentic systems haven't really taken off like everyone has already been talking about they would, because actually making these things reason is hard, and getting them to do these sort of loosely defined out in the real world tasks is difficult. and it's going to take a new approach. And that's, if you can zoom in a little on that. But so it's talking about basically open-endedness is something that is both novel and learnable. And but as it points out here, that depends on the observer. So for some futuristic alien, spaceship isn't real, like our rockets aren't very novel. That's pretty basic for them, but they can definitely learn to understand it. Whereas a mouse, an airplane is some incredible thing, like that's as novel as could be, but there's no way it could ever understand it. And it's talking about this realm of things like AIs being able to use being able to find things that are both novel and understandable, and that being sort of this sweet spot in terms of the way forward with making these things have autonomy and agentic behavior. So it's an interesting premise. I wouldn't say it's an important read though overall.
Yeah, I mean, Air Street is a really credible organization. People don't read their annual report each year. I encourage everyone to do it. It's really quite breathtaking. The thing I'm trying to get in my head, my little brain, Adam, is getting this agentic thing down a little more segmented in framework. I mean, to my mind, agentic just means a task gets kicked off. And I think there's so much of this breathlessness and emotion in unassisted task kickoff that I think there's subcategories, right? So in my mind, at one level, GPS has agentic in there. I tell the GPS to go from A to B. It's going along. It sees a crash, and it recommends to me, a task. Agentic comes up and says, "Hey, Paul, do you want to bypass this activity here?" And I think this notion that we're going to somehow jump to companies doing all these tasks that are unassisted and executing is naive. But so I think if they find the right category on that is the right breakdown.
Well, what it talks about in here, and I like the way they define it right near the top, when they talk about what an agent is, it's more than just the kicking off the tasks. It's combining, where did it go here? It's combining user input and environmental factors to perform multi-step tasks autonomously.
Completing the task. Here, their definition is completing the task.
Right. So it's sort of a little more than like RPA and automation and things being triggered and then going off and executing a function. It's that they're multi-step and they require both input from the environmental variables as well as the instruction from the user. So I like the way they define it. I think they've done a pretty good job of approaching it. I don't know what we're going to do with this yet. Yeah.
I think that's great, Evan, but why are we claiming that this is slow to take off? This is so advanced and high risk. It's early. How can we possibly?
Well, that's their point. Slow? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is that as somebody who spent like the better part of a couple of years on the dark side of the moon thinking about this stuff, the problem is that these folks are running into the fact that their epistemology isn't well developed. So the epistemology of, when you think about what agents are, they assume that as soon as you use the word agent, you're assuming an epistemology of both the sender of the agent as well as the agent, as well as the agent's context. In addition, you're using these fuzzy words like task, which have no good definition, right? So the tasks are usually emergently defined. Did I get something done, for somebody in a time series? And then the other thing is that as you dive into it, the epistemology of any functional knowledge is often squishy. And the reason it doesn't feel like something that's the reason it doesn't feel like we're going very fast or far is because every time we automate something, we no longer think of it as agentic. Put another way, if we understand something, it's no longer intelligent. So it's a sliding scale. And so it's an emergent epistemology in the context of a dynamic value function with a sliding scale as to when something is automated versus agentic. That's why you have these arguments. I mean, as they go into it, they will explore and see how complicated it is. The same thing that the guys in the late 60s found out when they tried to start automating intelligence. Anyway, sorry to go on that, but it's something that, that's why it's slippery. It's a slippery slope.
But so John, just keep me honest. So I get highly frustrated now when people say, "Oh, I have an agentic system," and I say, "I had literally no idea what you're talking about. Can you please explain it?" And then they can't, and then they get frustrated. I don't see the vision of AI, and I'm like, I don't think so, guys.
Well, that's why I came up with the law of computability, because to me, agentic systems are a subset of computability, and computability is always dynamic, right? Like we can compute more and more, and then you can say, okay, if computability is the framework, then I can say, where do the decision rights sit? You know what I mean? Do they sit in the human? Do they sit in the market? Do they sit in the aggregation of agents? You know, do you take a vote among 6 agents to then take a transaction? You know what I mean? So, but you can't do that if the environment's not computable. And so that's and computability, the realm of knowledge. When you start going into the epistemology of knowledge, you know, you have all kinds. You have revelatory knowledge. You have perceptual knowledge. You can actually, there have been studies that show, depending upon what I'm thinking about, what I see changes. Okay, so my referent architecture in terms of how I go from, you know, stimulus to my eyes to what I see is changed by the language I have in my head. Okay, so to me, the very best description of that kind of functional knowledge I found in a book by the Dalai Lama. I think it's Seeing the Universe in a Single Atom is the book, but and he calls it intersubjective verification. So Western science is intersubjective verification. That's great. That's fantastic. But what happens in AI is you have intersubjective verification. You know, I can predict something's going to happen and it happens, but then I can also expand the nature of the reality by using AI. So, you know, perhaps, for example, we might learn how to understand how animals speak. Well, that will be expanding the epistemology, and then that puts that in the realm of intersubjective verification, where it isn't right now, because we can't intersubjectively look at how a whale talks to another whale. But I believe we will get there. Anyway, that's why it's just your frustration will continue, Paul. I share the same frustration. I've shared it for 50 years. But that's why I wrote the law of computability, because for me, it gives a frame to stick that frustration into.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Adam, I feel validated that my frustration is not completely ill-founded. So thank you. That was a great riff, John. Very impressive. Optional, though.
Optional.
The next one we have looks at the new LLM pre-training and post-training paradigm.
Yeah, I took a look at this one, and I was going to make the case for important. I know, Adam, you only give it an optional, and you do this stuff, you know, every day. I just the reason I put it as important is I thought it was a nice comparison of how some of the Alibaba models and some of the some of the Apple models do pre-training, post-training. And you know what, you know, why you're using each of them and what kind of performance it gives. I'm sorry, and just how they do and why they do the kind of training that they do. So I thought it was not a bad little primer, given the fact that post training can be 50% or more of the cost of a model. I thought that it might be a worthwhile read and put it important. But what do you think, Adam?
I could almost be convinced of important. I feel like it's an interesting read, but it's I don't these are like massive models, right? How many people are actually going to use this information for actually pre-training a model of their own? Does it scale down to what we're talking about, like a companies can be able to, for 100K, build their own model? Or is all of the stuff that companies are doing with building these models using one of these foundational models like a whole different ballgame than the learnings that someone could take away from this and actually have any real applicable use for?
Yeah, fair enough. I was thinking more of the post training, which I thought some of them would do. I agree. The pre-training,
but that's post training of the foundational models. Is that still someone could do themselves, or is that what these companies, Quen and such of it, you know, Apple are doing before they even release it? Yeah. In terms of the efficiencies they gain in building these massive things.
Adam, I think that, and that's another thing. I've seen the language all around. So we hear they use pre-training, post-training, and some people use fine-tuning, which meaning is after I get the foundational model.
And now there's pruning. as well, right?
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Back to optional it is. Ankash, optional. Next.
The next one comes from Runway, and it talks about its Gen 3 Alpha Turbo model, and it can make videos faster than you can type.
Paul, what do you think here?
Another model that's getting better. I think it's faster, better, cheaper argument. I think it's amazing what Runway's doing. I think for our leaders, this is optional because our leaders, we assume, is already assuming everything's improving rapidly. So nothing dramatic here.
Hey, just a little tip for anyone who wants to have an opportunity to explore and experiment with the Runway model, because it's pretty expensive to use. They have a competition coming up. I've participated in it before. It's a global event called Gen 48. And if you go to the Gen 48 website and just register, they'll give you 300,000 credits to use over a 48-hour period. And you're just free to play in it and experiment. They want teams to put in 1 to, I think it's 3 or 4 minute video shorts. And they have like a film competition, but it's just brilliant marketing for them to just get tons of people to try their tool and then showcase to the world all the incredible stuff you can do with it. So yeah, there you go. Thanks. If you want to have a look at that, it's a great opportunity to have a play. I actually pay for the unlimited subscription, so I've already been using Turbo quite a bit, and it's fast. It's great. It's a good way to experiment and test prompts and sort of see the difference and learn. And then when I really want something, then I'll go into the slower Gen 3 Alpha without the Turbo and sort of get a more refined result. But it's probably still optional. To your point, Paul, these things are getting better, faster, cheaper.
Well, but I think it's really, and the other thing I put on as a footnote is I think it's in May, they have their New York City AI Art Festival, which is just a celebration of these models. And it's breathtaking to see what the community is doing over there. So it is incredibly interesting, optional. But thanks for, I'm signing up right now for this thing for Gen 48. Thank you.
All righty. Optional it is. I love the fact that the miracles of generating video from text are now just boring.
That's right.
All right. Akash.
The next one comes from New York Times, and it talks about how AI can help start small businesses.
Adam, what do you think of this one?
I'd consider it optional, really. It's a pretty lengthy read, and mostly the subject says it all, which I hope by now we all know, right? That if you're trying to ideate, if you're trying to get answers to question about how you get things done or how you can use this for business, maybe you could say this is important because it paints a pretty good picture of like what a simple thing but so powerful an LLM can be for a startup. But it's pretty obvious stuff in terms of what they actually share in the story here.
Yeah, it's interesting. The thing I find fascinating, and people aren't using this language, so maybe it's not popular, but when you think of small businesses or any business starting with a combination of talent and capital formation, we now have this huge source of capital, cognitive capital, in these models. Yeah, and that is now coming in, and I weigh in with the people who really think that AI is a sovereign issue, because when you look at the United States and maybe India now, although their challenge often is their capital formation and distribution is not anywhere near the depth of the U.S., but China's shooting itself in the foot when it's crucifying its entrepreneurs and trying to clamp down on this stuff. The United States, I mean, there's no place like the U.S. for your ability to get capital formation, talent, have somebody throw real money at you, and now that's all leveraged with these models. I think we're going to see entrepreneurial activity in this country like we've never seen before. I mean, this is bigger than the Industrial Revolution, not only because it's going into the thinking and knowledge and conversation layer of society, which is more important than the physical layer, but because very few people die for a better car, but they certainly will die for a story, and a belief system. But not only that, but we're unleashing this massive layer of capital, and any society that can create a market in business models, not just businesses. And I would say the United States is the world leader in a market for business models. It's still just going to pull ahead way, way faster.
Yeah, and Adam, thing I would add to that, it's become so clear to me after about the last 3 or 4 weeks for a whole variety of reasons that once people and teams start dipping into this, understanding it, they see more opportunities and they go further. So this idea that I'm going to be a slow follower and just catch up next year is naive and stupid and almost a losing strategy. Is that the leaders are going to be further ahead and almost uncatchable at some point. And when you're taking that talent into a disruptive area with incumbents sitting on their heels and startups, I'm reinforcing John's point that we may be looking at some really radical new innovations here.
Exciting times.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Kevin notes, entrepreneurs in other countries can tap into it as well. And European VC trends are promising. I hope so. I just think, Kevin, that I don't yet see the willingness of the Europeans to basically completely change employment bases and push people around the countries, without a lot of pushback. And I think the U.S. is still willing to, shut down whole industries and move things over. Look, I don't think the Uber phenomenon, for example, could have started in Europe. That the pushback would be faster. I'm happy to be. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they do that, because I think it would be the best news for the Western Alliance would be if Europe could be reinvigorated through I think of it as like the Marshall Plan for entrepreneurism, and maybe the open source models and the sharing of these things will. European capital in comparison to the U.S., I would argue, has been much more lethargic on the front end of innovation, and maybe this will be the way European entrepreneurs can get a leg up, even though their venture capital businesses are trivial compared to those in the U.S. Anyway, well, hope to be wrong on this one. All right. Thank you, Kevin. Good point. Next,
we're beating the crap out of these optional articles, though.
Well, it's fine. Hey, whatever.
It's Monday,
could make them
right?
all important.
Yeah.
Could make them all important. It's still optional reading. All right. Next.
The last one that we have for today is a research paper, and it talks about model merging in LLMs, MLLMs, and beyond.
Yes, I took a first whack at this, and truth be told, just took a once over lightly. I had it as optional because but also, if I were in a 3-letter intelligence agency in the U.S., I would say this is required reading, because again, we have Chinese researchers going deep into model management, model architectures, taxonomies for thinking about the problem. I think, given the proliferation of models, this, I think, is going to be a big skill set, right? Of how do you take these different models and improve them, detoxify them, amplify them. It's very early days. And to me, this reminds me of when I was in my doctoral program. I read an article where the Office of Naval Research was doing early packet switching in a thing called AlohaNet across radios in Hawaiian Islands. This is 1968. And, obviously a backbone of the TCP/IP architecture under the internet is packet switching. And, the Office of Naval Research, God love them, was in 68, was investing in AlohaNet as a research activity. I think the Chinese are doing a similar thing here. This notion of model merging sometime in the not too distant future, I think it'll move more quickly than the internet did, is going to be super important. And, these folks are laying out some of the ground rules and ways of thinking about it. So optional for today, but, super important for the scientific thinking of this domain, I would say. Other folks, what do you think?
I mean, I'd agree. It's sort of like next level agentic systems in a way, almost like rather than being multi-model, you're like unimodal. It's, in a way how it's kind of going the other way. So rather than drawing off all of them, it's like, well, why don't we combine them, right? And that's perhaps what we're going to get to next, or beyond that, in terms of bigger and better, I guess. It's it's still a bit out there. Yeah.
I mean, in a certain sense, the one way I think about it is that imagine back in computing before robust operating systems, right? And in a certain sense, we're creating semantic operating systems. Like, what's the architecture? What function is going to sit where? It's just we don't know yet, right? And in the early days, kind of, okay, is the printer driver part of the operating system, or is it, because we have a vertically integrated machine plus, or is the set of printer drivers going to a bunch of APIs, right? Where does memory management sit? Where's garbage collection? Like all these things that we take for granted in current operating systems and languages. What sits in the compiler? It's going to get interesting.
Yeah, John, just know Lucinda Lindy is acknowledging that RC, a startup, just raised, I think, $30 or $40 million, is doing Myrtle model merging now. So there's some experimentation out there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Ankash, we have the big O, I think, coming up.
We had
across.
Another no-hitter.
Really? This would be the second time ever.
Second no-hitter. Pitching's getting better every day. Yeah, no. Well, hey, what can you do? I think no great inflation here at GAI Insights. All right, optional across the board. But for those of a scientific bent, there are two things in here worth looking at, I think. Model merging and I would say the pre-train, post-train. Sorry, the open-endedness is all we need. So for the Google scholars among you, maybe check those out. All right, anything else? Paul, what's the Learning Lab tonight?
Yeah, Learning Lab tonight, we're going to go over Gen AI for busy professionals. It's a class that we've done multiple times, and we're going to share that tonight so people can give some feedback on it and see how what technology approach we've done for a couple thousand employees.
Great. And Paul, I don't know if you're going to be going through ChatHub GG. I think that for me, that's one of the most interesting things that professionals should understand about, this notion of how do you very simply compare up to 6 models, 2 models for free, 6 models for a subscription. And really, I find myself using it a lot and so forth. And then another thing I find myself using a ton is I've been using Pi to have conversations. I've been having conversations with it about everything from politics to linear algebra, and then also having it have conversations among thinkers. Like the other day, I had Nietzsche talking to Socrates about the meaning of life, and it's just, I mean, whatever. That may not float a lot of people's boats, but the amazing ability to participate in intellectual conversations, and learn, really have a tutorial, or to watch or have a 3-way or multi-log conversation among conversationalists. It's quite robust for that. And many of I think we've, over the past 3 or 4 months, we have reached a threshold effect in terms of these models being truly conversational. So anyway, I would just recommend that, because that for me has been, it's fun and kind of blows my mind.
Hey, John, and that's on the kind of life philosophy stuff here, more on the mundane. I had caught up with a buddy over the weekend where he works at a really large company, and in his organization, IT has all the power. So they've taken Gen AI, and he's over in the software development side, but they got a couple approved licenses, and they were on a big meeting where IT, Adam, was saying, there's no way we can move Workday over here. You don't understand how complicated it is to move it from premise and on and over on the engineering side, they had ChatGPT. They came up with a framework, and the guy literally said, what about this? And they put it right into the meeting here, and the whole 40-person meeting came to a stop.
I love it.
You got some real facts coming to the table here, and teams aren't involving these co-intelligence as equals, and it's being highlighted. So it's a fascinating world.
Well, Paul, you're giving me encouragement to make the case for the new Second Amendment, the right to bear AI. I mean, because that's definitely taking a gun to a knife fight. So there you go. All right. Well, thanks. I hope to see you all at the Learning Lab tonight. Adam, Ankash, Paul, thanks all.